with you, the amount of work that it is, I wouldn't do it again for that amount. I've done it for 5, I've done it for 6. I mean, there's a lot of things to it. And depending on how much you have done to it is going to cost you more and more. So the idea is you can either guarantee, by having a will, you can guarantee that you have a probate process and guarantee that, you have to add that $6,000 on top of whatever you do pay for that will. You can promise, you can guarantee that. Or you can go and do it a different way and avoid that. And so I would certainly suggest doing that. Substantial delay. All right. As you saw throughout the different seminars, throughout the different examples, there was substantial delay when you start talking about either not having a will or having a will and having to actually have it probated. You're guaranteed at least 1 year. Right? If somebody passes January 1st, that estate will not be closed by January 1st of the next year. Right? You automatically got a 6-month period where you have to be still once you find who the personal representative is, to allow people to allow creditors to be able to send in their bills, so to speak. Right? So it's a guaranteed. It is a long process, and it's something that you just cannot avoid. I'll be real brief with this next one. Taxes, and I'll just say taxes is an issue, okay? And I know somebody over here had a question about taxes, and because I'm not a tax attorney, I'm not going to go extensively in this, but I'll just say there's a threshold. Once you up to that threshold, you don't have to pay anything. Once you cover that threshold, you'll have to pay something. For state taxes, it's different than it is for federal. State, in the state of Maryland, it's approximately $1 million. Federally, it's $5 million. So once you cover those, once you cross those boundaries, you start to deal with tax issues. And so I would say definitely talk to a tax specialist when we start talking about that. Why do I need a lawyer? This is a good one, right? I see these commercials, they got LegalZoom. LegalZoom says I can create my will for $79, right? They got this little package at Staples for $39.99. I can go get a special little packet. They're gonna teach me how to do it, right? Has everybody seen something like that? All right. Now, I say to them this: if Staples or LegalZoom had a hip replacement kit that you could buy for $39.99, we'll double it, $59.99, right? You got a hip replacement kit for $59.99. Would you go do it? Would you go over there and let me go get my hip, and I'm gonna take care of this myself, right? No, you're going to go to a professional for serious matters. And if you don't believe that creating your legacy and the chaos that can and will ensue is something that's important, that you need a professional for, then I say, okay. But you will find that it's going to cost you now, it's going to cost you later. So I think at this point, it's to properly prepare is the step that I would choose to take. Anybody know who this guy is? Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs. And I have Steve Jobs on here just for one real reason, because the seminar that I have is called Running From It Will Not Save You, right? And this guy Steve Jobs was on top of the world. He had whatever money could buy, he bought it, okay? Right? I bet you if everybody raises their phone in the room, I bet you at least 10% of this room has got one of his phones. This guy sold 5 million phones in a weekend. So basically what I'm saying is there's nothing that he could not buy, right? Except more time, right? Running from it will not save you, right? I haven't heard anything about his estate. I don't have him on there as an example about what happens positively and or negatively to his estate. But I'd say, that it happens to all of us. So there is no getting away from what's going to happen. A durable power of attorney. I want to talk about directives. Okay, has everybody heard about a power of attorney or something like that? Okay, so the basic principle behind a power of attorney is it is a document that's created to say if for some reason I become disabled or unable to make decisions for myself, I am naming this person to be able to make these financial decisions for me. All right. Now, the good news, bad news. Good news is a lot of times they can work. They can give you the ability to make these decisions, but a lot of times they also don't, because banks they're not bound by the law to make sure that they accept it. Right. I've created some really nice, what I thought was really nice power of attorneys that banks just said, no thanks. I'm not going to accept that. Right? And it didn't matter how many times it was notarized, signed, this, that, and the other. They want to have it on their letterhead. They have their own form and style. And you don't find this out until it's too late. right? Because when you actually go to present it, it's like, hey, she's incapacitated. I want to be able to do this. And now they're like, that's not on our letterhead. We can't do that. What do you do? What you doing? Take that back with you. And now you can't go back and say, oh, she signed a new one. You're like, oh, yesterday you were in here talking about she was incapacitated. Now you're talking about she got a new one. If she didn't have the mental capacity yesterday, she probably doesn't have the mental capacity today. And so you won't find out about a lot of these things until it's too late. So you want to be able to find a way. Again, this is another thing. You want to be able to give in proper estate planning to give the, you want to be able to name the appropriate person to be able to handle your affairs if you become incapacitated. Anybody know who this guy is? Who is that? Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross. All right. In April of 2003, Luther Vandross suffered a stroke. Okay. He passed in July of 2005, right? So two years later. So now we all know he had bills and he had life, that he had to take, that he had to think about, pay for, and handle, right? But who handled those things, right? So that is one reason to have at least some type of advanced directive, because you just don't know what's going to happen. I don't think he knew that he was going to have a stroke at the time he did. Healthcare directive, right? So this is a similar document. It's a document that says that if I'm unable to make the medical decisions for myself, I'm naming this person to be my, the person that actually makes these medical decisions for me. Okay. Anybody ever heard of Terri Schiavo? Terri Schiavo. What do you know about Terri Schiavo?
Her husband wanted to take her off life support. Her parents wanted to leave her on life support.
Right. Her husband. Right. So at 37, Terri Schiavo had a heart attack in her kitchen and was incapacitated. Oxygen wasn't going to her brain for a certain period of time. By the time they got her stable, she was brain dead, or at least the doctors said that she was brain dead, a permanent vegetative state. Husband says, I know her. She wouldn't want to live like this. Her parents say, I don't think so, champ. You're not gonna take my daughter off life support. You're not killing my daughter. We're gonna wait and see this out. Long story short, 15 years later, they finally took her off life support, and that is what it is, right? But you talk about chaos. That's chaos. If there was a healthcare directive, if there was somebody that had the decision-making ability to be able to make decisions for her when she was disabled, then she would not have had that situation if they decided to make the appropriate decision. Anybody know who she is? Etta James, right? In 2008, Etta James was having dementia, right? And she didn't pass until 2012, right? So there was a 3 or 4 year period where we're in there where, she has some type of issues that she can't actually make the decisions for herself, right? So once she is diagnosed with dementia, I mean, if it happened, January 1st of 2008, if somebody tried, she created a healthcare directive December 15, and somebody says, hey, Etta James, I want to give it to Susie the ability to make these decisions for me. Well, if you're diagnosed in January 1st, December 15, they're going to say, man, she was out of her mind. That woman was crazy back then. She'd been crazy. They officially diagnosed her in January, but she had been losing her mind. So now you're going to have a legal argument. So you're creating chaos. Right? And so the idea is, while you have your wits about you and while you're able to make these decisions, you want to go ahead and make the decisions for yourself while you can. And in summary, I certainly want to just say the idea is to plan, right? There's a difference between planning and proper planning, okay? And just because you create a plan doesn't necessarily mean you create a proper plan, all right? And sometimes you can do worse for yourself, all right? But the idea is you now are equipped with the tools to say what is a proper plan, right? We outlined them before, all right? The chaos versus peace, all right? So when we talk about chaos versus peace, we talk about the chaos that is ensued, but you automatically open yourself up to a certain amount of chaos when you start, when you create a will and you create some of these different documents. But now so the idea is you want to avoid that chaos. You want to be able to arm yourself with the questions to be able to avoid some of the chaos that you automatically can ensue. All right. And you want to talk about legacy versus passing assets, right? You don't want to think about estate planning as just death documents. That's not it. That's certainly not a very pleasant thought, right? But the idea is you want to create a legacy. You want to be able to impart your wisdom upon the people that you want to impart it upon. Okay, and so before I open up questions, I certainly say if anybody wants, there are some cards I believe that I had on the last section. Some of these, well, I'll certainly pass them out a little bit later. But on there, it's you can write this down: www.tyrone TYRONE.legacycomplete.net. You can go on there, you can register, and it'll certainly send you information about, you can look on there, and there are some different, free webinars and information about, creating a state that you can start to download. And so, Tyrone TYRONE .legacy LEGACY complete.net. Tyrone.legacycomplete.net. All right. Are there any other questions? Yes, ma'am. 2019, but today, April 12, 2014, you decide to put your children's name on this deed, right?
Somebody go rob a bank.
No, but you open up the ability for them to have some say and some control over what happens. Let's say you are now incapacitated and they sell it for pennies on the dollar because they need something, But if you don't have the ability to make the decision because you're incapacitated, you don't even get a say. All right. So I just say, there's plethora of issues that can come from it, but that's at least one.
And then there's some possible things if you wait late in life, right?
Right.
If you wait later in life,
For instance, for me, right, I've owned a piece of property since I was 20 years old. I was not there for my son's name on it,
okay,
or whatever.
okay,
But as I get older, and at least by the time I'm 70, I will put his name on it. Is that,
or you can come talk to me and we can talk about some other ways to be able to disseminate this to him in a better manner.
all right.
Yeah. First, right here.
I have an uncle in his 70s, but he's planning out his estate and wants to make me the executor of the personal
Person representative, yes.
representative. And he's a retired police officer. And one of the things we didn't discuss, but I'm curious about now, is that what happens with his firearms and how can a firearm be transferred over to, like he has a nephew who's in law enforcement or heading that way. Have you ever encountered anything like that?
Sure. I mean, you would think that would be a bequest. So the question is, she's got an uncle who's up in age. He wants to name her as the personal representative, but the uncle has a plethora of firearms, right? And so the question is, how do you give away a gun to somebody, and kind of the ramifications of that? Did I ask your question right? Well, I mean, if in his will or in his documents he says, "Hey, I want my guns to go to Cousin Tommy," then I think that's one way to disseminate it, by giving a specific bequest of those guns to Cousin Tommy.
How does that handle the law of owning a gun, though? Like,
Well, yeah, you got to at least think about, does Cousin Tommy have a record? And, if he does, then he may not be able to take possession of these things. But that's a little bit more, it's more on Cousin Tommy's side than it is on your uncle's side.
Yeah, that's not the case.
Yeah.
Okay. I just thought you had to go through a legal documents or have something in place before.
For registration purposes, I'm sure there's some type of registration change that has to be made. You as the personal representative will be the one to do it. Well,
Thank
your question?
How many powers of attorneys can you have? Like, I know you just have one, but can you have multiple?
Okay, well, the purpose behind a power of attorney is to name someone to handle your financial affairs if you're unable to handle those financial affairs. So you don't need a plethora
Like,
of
say
them.
if you have, like, say if I have my mother passes, so would I have to at that point name another power of attorney, like say my sister?
Ah, okay, so you're talking about the, okay, I understand what you're saying. So on a power of attorney, the person that you give the ability to make the financial decisions for you, that person is called the attorney in fact, okay? If your attorney in fact dies or becomes disabled, you're gonna have a contingent attorney in fact. And so on that power of attorney, on the actual document, there are gonna be at least one contingent person that can name it. I try to name two, but you have at least one other person that is going